evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's event. We are continuing the New Mainers series with Connecting Across Cultures in partnership with the Camden Public Library. And tonight we're going to be hearing from Jennifer Sporzynski. She is Senior Vice President with Workforce and Business Development at CEI Coastal Enterprises, Inc., headquartered in Brunswick. She's been working in community economic development for many years, since 1993, in the United States, Guatemala, and Paraguay. And we're also going to hear from Stu Cantor of Connecting Across Cultures as they discuss immigrants to Maine and the economy tonight.
If folks want to know more about Connecting Across Cultures, just drop us an email at cacmidcoast.org, cacmidcoast.org. We are in the midst of a very ambitious toy drive, and we welcome people either contributing toys or financial support. And even on top of that, we'd love to have more volunteers. So we'd love to hear from everybody.
100 million people are displaced. So while the United States is the biggest resettlement country, we do the largest, well, we used to, I think we took a hit there for a while. We used to be the largest resettlement country. Is still a drop in the water for who and where people are and how they're being displaced. I think it's about 27 million that are considered refugees. There's a lot, and obviously in the last year, there's just been a massive amount of displacement with what's going on in Ukraine. But then, of course, many other places that we really just don't even hear about. So just to give you a scale and scope of, and then in Maine, just so that 125,000 coming in, Maine generally takes in about 600 individuals a year. So we're small but mighty, as we are for many, many things. And that is, I think, what the numbers were for last, our groups operate on a fiscal year, so that just ended, and they operate on the federal fiscal year. And interestingly, almost half, but not quite half, last year were from Afghanistan. And again, we understand, that was a notable, but that's a pretty big bump up from years past. Yeah.
Thanks.
So just a little bit more on who and numbers.
Mm-hmm. Which I guess leads to the question, who Coastal Enterprises, Inc. has been working with and helping immigrants for about a quarter century, I believe, since I think it was 97. So happy 25th birthday there.
Thank you.
Can you give us a look at, kind of who's come in the door, what they're looking for, where they're from, their story?
Yeah, happily. And so I know I just rattled off all these numbers. We don't do any, just to be very clear, we're not sort of the frontline agency that's working with people. We're not, luckily we have lots of really awesome groups that are doing the meet you at the airport and getting you into housing and getting you set up. What we do is a small program. Well, we do several different things, again, sort of financing, advising, and policy. And I'll try to touch on all of those. But right now, for the for business development, it's very much, well, right now it's one-on-one. Because we've been operating this program over 25 years, we've tried lots of different ways to meet need. And we started with sort of cohort classes on, so you want to start a business. We've really, based on who was coming to us and what we were seeing, realized that we could be much more nimble and get better outcomes for people if we just met one-on-one and heard what people wanted and what their experience was and help them navigate different systems. So our so within the business advising primarily someone comes in and 2/3 of people that we work with ran a business either in their home country or in the refugee resettlement, in the refugee camp. So they are coming to us, those that actually do open a business, often coming to us with pretty strong business skills, but are wondering, how do you do it here? What do I need to do? I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to misstep. What are the steps? So we call ourselves business advisors, but we really are more like a navigator for someone on connections and making sure people know what to do and how to do it. So generally speaking, Stu, over the last 25 years, it's really changed. It's evolved who we've worked with. I think you mentioned we have worked with, and we need to update our numbers actually, because we just looked again. We have worked with people from 101 countries. And we are also changing all, primarily we work in Greater Portland and Lewiston areas, because that's where the largest populations are, but that is also changing in Maine, and we can certainly talk about that more later. But generally speaking, yeah, we like to say it, we work with half the world when we say that. Now it's actually over half the world. So when you then break down the number, that's a lot of individuals from Africa, primarily Somalia, the Great Lakes regions. So so it can be the DRC, Rwanda, Burundi, and then a fair amount of individuals from Iraq as well. And then a whole smattering of other countries. Angola's another bigger group coming in now. Yeah. And I would suspect that we will, so I alluded to this earlier. So people, you know, you, and again, I said I wasn't going to speak to the experience, but generally what we've seen is someone comes to us after they've been in the country a few years. So the kids are in school, they've been through 1 or 2 jobs, they're more comfortable with just all those basic things you need to, you know, how to get around wherever you're living. And then they say, okay, now it's time for me to do, you know, this is stereotyping, but often they're in a job that's below their education level and what they would like to try to do. And so for some individuals, owning a business is a way to sort of regain just some control and ability to earn more money by growing a business. Yeah.
And are there business pursuits initially focused on their home fellow immigrants from their home countries, or do they have an American dream that, you know, of broad embrace on the commercial side of life here in Maine?
I would say it varies by, there's not quite a great answer for that, but there are, we see a fair amount of interest in things that have sort of low barriers to entry because, you know, especially if you're coming as a refugee, a lot of people don't know this, you have to pay your flight to the United States and your family's flights to the United States. So most people who arrive as refugees they arrive in debt because they might be bringing over 5 family members, and flights from wherever you're coming from are not inexpensive. And you don't, despite, again, a lot of misinformation out there, you don't get a whole lot of support for a long period of time. So I will say when we're working with someone, they're not coming to us with a whole lot of savings because in fact, they've been put into debt with their travel. So sometimes it can be something that is that does not require a lot of capital to start. And we can talk about our lending and different products we've created as well. And I would say to your point, do people do, yeah, About 15, 20 years ago, we saw a lot of interest in creating halal markets. So grocery stores that were catering to certain foods and culturally appropriate foods for populations. And but that's not, then you saturate, a market saturates at some point, and so then people shift to other ideas. So I think sometimes that we'll see that if it's a group of people that are that they don't quite have their food offered in a way, shape, or form, that might happen. But it really varies. Lots of service, lots of retail, lots of I'm trying to think of some that might be, you certainly, for me as a consumer, I usually get quite excited about the restaurants, but that's exclusively me as a consumer. But we've had some businesses that have been operating for over 20 years that we've worked with. They found their niche and they're, yeah. So, I mean, a lot are food-based. Of the ones who come to us, not the ones who open, but what someone says they want to do, 2/3 of them are food-based. So that, yeah.
A friend of mine who's a former chair of Coastal Enterprises, Inc. Once, on more than one occasion, applauded Maine for being a very receptive environment for entrepreneurs and kind of people who want to build from scratch. And I'm wondering how that environment has embraced or been embraced by immigrants, whether or not immigrants, when they come to Coastal Enterprises, Inc., say something about how they are or not welcomed or feel that the opportunity is here in Maine for them, or are they striving in an environment that has considerable challenges and barriers to that entrepreneurship?
Well, as someone who works in what we refer to as the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Maine, I would love to think that we are fantastic and offering everything that's needed. But that is likely quite naive. I have worked in other states, and but again, in the same capacity as a service provider, not as an entrepreneur. So I can't speak to how entrepreneurs feel about the system. I will say that as someone who is part of quite a big group of people supporting entrepreneurship, we have heard the same thing, like Maine there's so many people and you are, you refer people and all those things. I also don't want to speak to someone's experience, but I have personally witnessed when I'm working with a client that they've received some, let's say, inappropriate and or racist remark or feedback. So I'm sure it happens. I can't personally speak to it, but I think one thing we can all do is to, work towards making this place more welcoming, and there's lots of different ways of doing that.
Well, you just referenced one considerable hurdle. Are there other hurdles or barriers that immigrants face when they are trying to start up that business here in Maine?
Yeah, I mean, I think, yes. So capital is one, but I do think the other bigger one is just not having the time and space to think about doing it, right? You might be just busy trying to keep up with either housing or where your employment is and all of those other factors. So I would say we have worked with individuals who have run quite big and successful businesses in their home country. And they've had to modify what they're going to do initially, which is got to be incredibly frustrating. I can only imagine, you know, if you were a top X in your home country and you had this very successful business, and then, you know, someone's saying, okay, well, you're really only going to be able to access about 50,000 in capital. What can you do with that? So, resources in the sense of capital, space. I mean, that there are a lot of rules and regulations, particularly in our larger cities, that can be quite limiting as well. And those kind of keep changing. Actually, we keep sort of changing those rules in some of our cities, so those can be challenging too.
So working through, let's say you know, if you want to, let's say, start a restaurant, and, you know, the codes that are involved in having a restaurant, health codes, taxes, insurance, all those other things, you know, if you're able to find your way through that with the assistance maybe of people at CEI, beyond kind of getting those building blocks firmly in place, what has been the other ingredients that you've seen that these immigrant initiated enterprises have helped them succeed?
Well, you have to, that's an interesting question. I think I alluded, right? So there's, of the ones that open or grow businesses, 2/3 of them had that experience. So they're coming to us with very strong business acumen, right? We don't spend a whole lot of time going over like ROI and all of it. We certainly can, and we will help people put their thinking into like a cash flow statement or something that a lender needs to see, right? I mean, we do a lot of sort of taking and helping speak, you know, US lender speak for individuals. I think figuring out, just like any entrepreneur, you have to figure out what your market is and what size is and who's going to buy from you, and then meeting that need. So, you know, that's business. That's it. That is all it is. But if you've already done that before, you can translate that into another venture you're going to do here. So that's always quite helpful. I guess I've alluded to capital being a challenge, but we have come up with several ways of actually trying to meet that need. So I'm highlighting these challenges, but they're, you know, then we're also, as service providers, trying to help get these move the barriers as much as we can. So as an example, one thing we saw a lot of 10, 15 years ago were mostly Somali or Iraqi clients and they're Muslim, and they would come to us. It'd be a great idea. We'd work on it. And then they'd say, oh, your loans have interest. My religion doesn't, it prohibits me paying or receiving interest. So I'm not gonna borrow the money, even if they were qualified, because of that. So we spent a fair amount of time, and with that feedback from the customer, not just because we wanted to create a product, we worked for about, I don't know, 6 months or so with an economist who was also Muslim, and we spoke to a lot of the community leaders and several other agencies around the country and different lenders, and created a loan product, sort of 2 products that are Sharia compliant. And then we saw that we were able to make many more loans and start many more businesses because we had a product that met a need in the community. And so that's just one example of removing a slight barrier. And it also just gave, you know, on top of it, removing a barrier was a little bit of like, it was you know, it's the teeniest little give of, oh, you want to understand a little bit about, I mean, you know, we're not walking in their footsteps by any means, but we're at least understanding that this is something, again, our goal really for these businesses is helping people become economically self-sufficient. And then, you know, generally speaking, business ownership leads to greater wealth creation, and using business as a tool to help someone build an asset and wealth is sort of our, you know, that's our special sauce.
Before returning to some more questions that I have, I just want to make sure that those who are watching, if you have questions, to drop them into the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. You know, at any point, feel free to send a question, and I think Julia will be aggregating those. So again, go to the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen, type in a question, and we'll wait for those to happen, or for Julia to cut me off as they come in. And I guess until that point, until Julia waves me away, Jennifer, if you have a sense, are there particular barriers or challenges here in Maine, or if you're an immigrant who wants to start a business, no matter where you are in the 50 states, you know, the challenges are the challenges are the challenges?
I do not know the answer to that question, actually, because I haven't lived in those states. So I don't know, Stu. I don't, you know, I would imagine that there are, we could generalize some challenges. I will say, having worked in a larger metropolitan area and then coming to Maine, it generally is less expensive to start the same type of business in Maine. So that, in other words, I mean, CI will lend up to $500,000 or occasionally $1 million, but you know, you can start a business with a $50,000 loan, and like, that can be a really substantial. We've seen really substantial businesses grow to and be sold actually with smaller loans. So you know, I can't speak to the other states, but I can speak to what I've seen as success, right? And particularly in this population, I think we've helped start 486 businesses in Maine, owned and operated by you know, refugees and or immigrants. I guess we'll use that term generally speaking. So that's you know, we've helped remove some barriers. Not everyone was able to start a business. You know, sometimes our work is helping someone come to a realization that that plan isn't going to work, and we're not going to put someone in, you know, we never say no, in the sense that, no, you can't do that. But our role is, oh, you want to do that? Let's think about what that means. What does it mean to you? How do we do it? You know, we're asking a whole lot of questions and helping someone come to their own conclusion on pursuing it. Yeah.
I read, and I found this very interesting, that in a way, CEI almost turned the, let's say, the immigration story upside down, in a sense. There was a project, I think about 6 years ago, looking at how Maine farmers could grow crops like amaranth and fava beans and I think mustard greens, to address the needs, the special needs of ethnic communities, especially in the Massachusetts and Boston area in particular. And so, you know, it's taking the presence of a substantial immigrant or foreign-born population and having folks here in Maine look at that population maybe from the other end of the telescope as a market to pursue. And I just thought that was kind of interesting and exciting, that we've been discussing how CEI in particular helps immigrants start or build businesses, but you've also done work, research on looking at how Maine farmers can kind of enter into new markets.
Yeah, we will say we also, many years ago as well, had a program that did work with, we don't run the program anymore, but it is still running with a partner nonprofit on slightly different than what you're talking about, Stu, but basically those who were farmers in their home country being able to get and access land and grow food that's culturally appropriate for what they're looking for. So that is slightly different than you mentioned, but it's also, again, along the food lines. And then introducing some of those foods, they were part of this other research project. But yes, I think if you're a business owner and you're not looking at the demographic changes of this country, then you're missing markets for sure. Yeah.
And I was looking at some of the success stories that CEI has featured on the website, and like you, I was taken quite by the food-oriented success stories. Kebab shop. Somebody has chocolate in home, handcrafted goods, and the Rwanda Bean Company in Portland. So the food success stories speak very much to me. But are there things you can say, kind of looking at the myriad success stories on the CEI site that kind of link them, stitch them together?
What do you mean by that? Like tell me what you're.
Well, these are in many instances people who are coming to the US or here in the US with limited English capabilities, or as you say, limited financial resources, or maybe coming here with a certain kind of imagination. The Rwanda Bean Company, the story on the website said that basically the Rwandan coffee growers get about 1% of what we pay for a cappuccino in terms of the income generated by that cappuccino represents, or not the income from that, but
Right.
They get the equivalent of about 1% of that cappuccino, and that the individual who started the Rwanda Bean Company in Portland is endeavoring to have a profit sharing system whereby the coffee growers back in Rwanda are getting half of his profits.
Yeah.
And it's both imaginative in the sense of trying to aid the farmers who are creating the resource that we enjoy. And so it's that I don't know, kind of economic grittiness that says things can be made better.
Well, I do find that all entrepreneurs, we work with lots of entrepreneurs every year. I mean, looking at all our programs in Maine, we CEI lends to about 100 businesses, but we advise about 3,000 across the state. And it's someone who's willing to put themselves out there and run a business is they're naturally willing to they're more of a risk taker, I would say. And if I were to try to summarize all the individuals we work with, generally speaking, within Start Smart, our business advising program with immigrants, I think it's the same, it's grit. If you've left your home country and you've been able to successfully get out of it and get resettled into the United States, starting the business is not the biggest lift you've done in your life. And we just try to make it, we're not creating these businesses, but we're just trying to make it just a teeny bit easier for those individuals that they could start their business without us. Like, we're very clear about that, but we're just trying to help make it just a teeny bit easier. Yeah. So Britt, I think you're right. I think, you know, people have been through a lot more than me. I don't know about you guys, but yeah.
Thank you. Julia, I think you may have a question there.
Yes, so we have a question from Catherine Harrison. The question is, do you have current data on the total number of immigrant-owned businesses in Maine?
Ooh, that is a great question. And I do know that data. I do not know it because the way that the data is captured, I can find it. I just don't have it on the tip. I think I want to say it's broken out by race and not foreign born, actually. So you have to do a little bit of extrapolating. Yeah. It's, I will say, when I've done it in the past, and again, I haven't looked recently, it's higher as a percentage of like the number of businesses are higher than sort of the percentage of people that are not immigrants. Does that make sense? That own businesses? Yeah.
Thank you.
Jennifer, I think you alluded earlier that many of the individuals who come to CEI looking for business advice and such are coming from having experience back in their home countries with businesses,
Yeah.
oftentimes very successful businesses. Have they kind of said, you know, we're mystified by certain practices here in the US, certain codes or what have you? You know, back in the home country, we could do this, that, or the other, and nobody would say boo. But here we have to do or be mindful of, or, you know, there are these forms of, have they expressed, you know, let's say bemused bewilderment by
Yeah, I'll
certain
give you
businesses?
I mean, for sure, there's a lot more paperwork, you know, that's again, just really summarizing it. That is a very common response.
Mhm.
But I'll give an example of just like a kind of a sample of a policy action we did quite a while ago. We were seeing several businesses that wanted to do hair braiding in Maine. And if you want to do hair braiding commercially in Maine, you used to need to have a cosmetology license, which required like an inordinate amount of training. And I can't remember the amount of hours, but I want to say like 200 hours of training and like a $15,000 school fee. And what they cover in that training, they don't cover hair braiding. That's not part of the curriculum. But that was how the code and how the rules were written. So we worked with an entrepreneur that wanted to do it, but did not feel the need to go to this class and get. So we do have a policy arm at our organization. We tend to work in coalition with policy, and we were able to pull in several other individuals and get a bill sponsored to change that rule because it felt extravagant for what and not related to what the person wanted to do as a business. So there's just a quick, and that actually made it through on one session. Like we were able to, I mean, the entrepreneur testified and we had others sort of testify on the professional side of it, and we had sponsors and it passed. And now they are running quite successful business. We don't tend to try to get rid of regulation, to be honest with you, on a lot of our work, but this regulation just felt a little maybe not thought out. let's just say. So that's an example of something we might do or help. Now, we would never do it if we didn't have someone that was willing to do that and speak it to how it might benefit them. You know, we wouldn't, that's a lot going and testifying at the state house. And so, in fact, we had several people prior to that and no one really wanted to come forward. And there's just a lot of fear. And I think that we didn't want to push anyone in that way, but we ultimately had someone that was quite comfortable taking that on because she saw the benefit for her business. And now others benefit from it too.
Thank you. I think, Julia, you have another audience question, I believe.
Yes, Brenda Squibb is wondering what sort of pushback do you encounter in the course of your work and from who, if any?
We occasionally get some very interesting emails from people that don't like something that we're doing. I would say those emails often get CC'd to our federal delegation. So we sometimes get that. Those are very rare, but they stick with you, I will say. You know, I think we and so many others that I mean, I guess just kind of pushback is that we're always trying to do more. And so the way CI operates is by raising money, and we pull in a whole bunch of different resources to do our work. And so some, you know, we're always trying to find funding to do more of the work we do. It's not really pushback, but it's a limitation in what we do. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
in that vein, Jennifer, I guess a question that I should have asked maybe at the top is why are immigrants on CEI's radar?
Yeah, well, and actually, you know, because they're, why are they? Well, our mission, it's, you know, working with different, what we sometimes refer to as marginalized populations. That's our whole mission. And that can include low to moderate income individuals. And when you look at our data, we are a what's called a certified community development financial institution. And we're certified through the US Treasury. And the way we're certified is that we do a lot of paperwork that shows and that our work is benefiting low to moderate income individuals and communities, and it's documented in a whole host of ways. And we do that work through, we've chosen to do that work primarily through business development with individuals. We also do, we didn't really talk about it much too, we do a bit about the workforce, so businesses that are growing, we are also matching those growing businesses with individuals that may be somewhat left out of the workforce and trying to get them back into the workforce. We're much more popular on that right now because businesses can't find employees. That one goes in waves depending on who's interested in doing that. And right now we're very popular on that because of a lack of generally a lack of employees.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Great. Julia, I think you have another question.
Yes, so Catherine Harrison says, at one time you were involved in getting some childcare businesses started, and she's wondering, did those ever launch and how are they doing now?
Oh, yeah. So we actually have quite an active childcare sector portfolio right now. Thanks for the softball, actually. So we statewide have a program called the Child Care Business Lab, and it is basically an entrepreneurship training to get more childcare businesses opened statewide, focusing actually quite in the rural parts of the state. And if you've been reading the news, childcare is in crisis for sure. Slots in childcare is in crisis. Financially, it's quite a fascinating model. And so we're actually we're trying to get at it on a lot of different levers, but one of the ways is just helping create more businesses so that more slots are available so that families can work. Back to that shortage bit earlier. And we have 2 programs with what we're calling the Child Care Business Lab, one in Lewiston and one in the greater Portland area right now. And we're primarily working with in Lewiston is primarily African immigrants, and Portland it's a broader group on childcare. We've had a lot of businesses start, and I would say, you know, these are you can start a business by, you know, filing paperwork. So the real work is going to be helping support them to thrive. And I think we've put in a lot to help people be ready, but it's going to be a lot of work to help them thrive because it's a really challenging business. I don't want to talk anyone out of it, but it's tricky. And often folks who you really want running childcare businesses, you know, they maybe don't want to stereotype here, but they're focused on the kids, which is what you really want them to do. And so we're trying to come in and help kind of put some scaffolding around the business structure so that they're successful. So yes, I'm really excited about our childcare work, but I think, you know, I don't want to claim any massive successes yet because, you know, let's see if they make it for, you know, let's ask me in 4 years, are they all still open? That will be a success. Yeah.
And, you know, you've mentioned Portland and Lewiston, and we here at Connecting Across Cultures are looking at helping immigrants in the Mid-Coast area.
Yeah.
Is CEI involved with immigrants located elsewhere in the state?
Yeah, we so as I might have mentioned, so CEI, you know, our headquarters are Brunswick, but we have staff in 10 offices around the state. So we're down east, we're in Rockport, we're in Bangor, we're in Ellsworth, we're in Machias, we're in Farmington, Waterville, Augusta, Biddeford, Portland. So we have programming there, or it might be one staff person there. So we are working in other communities, especially as those communities grow. And yes, we are.
Great. So
we work, the majority of our work, I will say, still remains for this work is Portland and Lewiston. Yeah, less so, but some Biddeford, some Augusta. Yeah.
So we're coming up to, unfortunately, to the end of our conversation time. So if you were to kind of leave viewers and listeners and those who want to help immigrants or new Mainers leave with one message, is there a bumper sticker or fortune cookie answer you'd give to people to take away into the night and to tomorrow?
Oh, I should have been prepared for this question. I don't think I have a bumper sticker. I don't know. I mean, go shop. We've got lists of businesses on our website if you need to think about holiday shopping. That for sure exists.
And that website address is?
Oh, CEI Maine. Maine is spelled like the state of Maine.org.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Julia. And thanks to the Camden Public Library.
Thank you, Stu. Thank you, Jennifer. Thanks to Connecting Across Cultures.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Very interesting. And we're excited to have more programs in the New Mainer series coming up.
Thank you. We'll be back.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night, all.